Wonderful. Thank you, Joel. And hello, everyone. I'm joining and presenting today from Charlottesville, Virginia, right in kind of the center of the state. It's a lovely day, but I do just want to give two maybe warnings, is that I've got a little dog who thinks he's bigger than he is. So maybe he'll bark at some point and want to say hi. So we're really hoping to mitigate that. But if that happens, I do apologize in advance. And secondly, I also live near an airport, and it seems like they're starting to do some test flights for the military today. So it sounds loud to me. I hope it doesn't come over so loud to you, but I did also just want to share that and get that out of the way now. I've also really enjoyed reading where everyone's joining from today. It's super great to see the representation across the nation and into Canada. And I think I saw one in particular from Tia Romano joining us from Loveland, Colorado, which that couldn't have been a better town to be joining from today for today's presentation on weddings. Like Joel said, I will have a slide deck for everyone, and I'm going to pull that up on the screen now. I don't have the confidence that maybe Dr. Michael Brown might have, how he can kind of just go without any cues or anything on the screen. But here we go. I'm here today to present some information on weddings. Weddings, as you all know, just like every other event right now, has seemed to have taken a hit and seems to be super impacted. And something that I like to do for some of the non-client venues that I work with, and also the clients that I do work with, every month I like to kind of send a summarized email with news articles pertaining to one topic in particular to the industry. And back in August or so, I did a deep dive into weddings, and it got me thinking that this is something that I think a lot of folks would be interested in learning about and kind of diving into themselves. And as I was doing the research, I realized that a lot of what I was reading and finding gave some great advice and great tips for how to manage the in-person aspect of weddings. And I want to just kind of state right off the bat that for today, at least, I really want to take the time to really kind of provide two core bits of information and data for you to think about and to maybe bring into your own world. The first is I'm going to talk about stats from 2019 regarding the industry as a whole. And then I'm going to end the session today giving you 5 tips moving forward for how to establish a great program and some new and interesting ways to attract new potential business, as well as manage the existing business that you've got on the books or maybe rebooking into 2021. So I'm going to get started now officially on why weddings. So in 2019, I found this stat unbelievable. There was an estimated 2,126,126 weddings. Now I know that that sounds really specific, and that's not a typo to see the 126 back to back, but that's a ton of weddings. And it got me thinking, if there's maybe over 2 million weddings per year, let's maybe say that that was the expectation for 2020, what does that mean for the industry when so many of those weddings are having to postpone, reschedule, rebook, or cancel? And what is that impact on the industry? So that really kind of started to get me going into this topic a little bit more. Additionally, as we look at weddings, I feel like the margins for weddings are slim in particular. So they're not the most profitable event types. However, the one thing about weddings that's maybe not as true for event types everywhere is that weddings do happen in every single town, no matter where you live, and it's a great way for you to attract business, as opposed to the more profitable maybe business types that are always looking for a major city center or a centralized transportation hub, an easy way to get there. And better yet, as we're kind of going into the 2020s, we're starting to notice that the couples and the folks getting married are really starting to dig deep and opt out of the traditional wedding that maybe we're all used to, or maybe we're used to growing up or having a traditional wedding ourselves. And what I mean by that is that there's a lot of higher demand for trends related to food, beverage, guest engagement once they get there, and most obviously, the venue at which the wedding is taking place. I think one great extension of the uniqueness of every couple is where they decide to get married. And for you, most of you, at least on the call today, who are venue professionals, and for the planners as well, that gives you a great opportunity to really use our platform in particular to identify those types of venues, but also to lean into that and promote yourself as that unique wedding venue type that people are looking for. So moving forward, as venues continue to respond to the current environment, the 2021 and 2022 seasons are going to give a really good opportunity for rebuilding business. Now, the challenge with that is, how do you prepare to market your venue and proactively provide services attractive to newly engaged and rebooking couples? Certainly, the needs of the couples is much different than what it was before. So how can you adapt to that and be proactive and showcase that, most importantly, so that people are able to trust you and believe in what you have to offer and really want to take advantage of that and maybe even present them options that they haven't even been thinking of themselves. So like I said, before we dive in a little bit deeper, I wanted to take the approach of talking about this amazing event type and what it makes it so special to host and source this kind of business. And the stats that I'm about to dive into, I don't think that they're mutually exclusive to 2019 or before. I just think that this year was all about adapting and responding and just staying afloat, whereas next year is going to be a mad dash and will require creativity, service, and expertise to pull off successful events and make your venue or your planning business or your vendor service money, because that's another really important piece. And finally, why weddings? Because they're a ton of fun. This is me and my wife at my cousin's wedding, and I'm pretty sure our wedding go-to song is Love Shack by the B-52, so I wouldn't be surprised if that was the song that was playing in the background. But we all deserve a little bit of excitement and share that excitement with complete strangers and help them make the most of one of the most memorable days of their entire lives. And that's a huge privilege and a huge honor for us as an industry to be able to help do that. One thing that I heard in speaking with venue professionals, as well as some couples that I know personally that I was invited to their weddings, is one word that kind of encapsulated the entire process this year was stress. And that's really sad. And it makes me sad for you professionals, because I know that that's the last thing that you want to be feeling. And that's the last emotion that you want your clients to be feeling. I'm sad for your clients, because whenever I was planning my wedding in 2017, it was an easy year. And I flipped my lid when I had to choose the centerpieces for my tables. That was such a minor decision, and I couldn't imagine what I'd be like in this situation today. So I'm really trying to be empathetic with that as well. I was invited to 5 weddings this past summer, so selfishly, I'm a little bit bummed that I wasn't able to experience those myself. For the record, 2 of those ceremonies were rescheduled as mini-monies, which we'll talk about in a little bit. 2 opted to rebook their weddings and fit within the guidelines of their states and host a sizable wedding. And then 1 was entirely pushed to 2021. And I will be honest, I didn't go to any of the weddings that I was invited to this year. And that's hard for me as a representative of the industry. So selfishly, I'm ready to go back, not feel the weight of that decision, and just let loose and have fun with people in their special day. In my research for this topic, I did want to share and cite my sources, of course. When you have this as a PDF that comes your way, you will be able to click on these links and read those articles yourself. Just so you know, the AP article, the top one, is about the human element of the vendors tap to work weddings. It addresses the reality of vendors needing to balance their livelihoods with their safety and personal lives. And it also addresses the importance of the responsibility held by wedding venues, vendors, and attendees to keep a safe environment during these times. The Wedding Wire Newlywed Report, that's going to be a lot of what you're about to see. It's super great. I can't recommend it enough. They do this every year, so you can even go back and look at the previous year's worth of data if that's something that you'd like. The Atlantic article was actually kind of the article that kickstarted my interest in weddings when the pandemic broke out. And it's about how the pandemic has affected wedding culture and how those effects impact the vendors and couples downstream and into the future. One key takeaway from that article is the mini-moni. and how these might provide venues the flexibility and vendors the flexibility to host more ceremonies in a calendar year due to small, intimate events being acceptable for weeknights or maybe multiple mini-monies a day. The New Yorker dives into that topic a little bit more. And I think now might be a good time to kind of define what a mini-moni and a micro-wedding is, because you'll be hearing me say this a lot. A mini-moni is the most intimate wedding that you can imagine in the best of times and in these times. Mini-monies are really centered around the act of marriage, the importance of marriage, and the bonding of two individuals in that process. Typically, mini-monies are going to be held with less than 10 people, and that does include the officiant and the couple who is getting married. And mini-monies are really just a focus on the ceremony itself and not the pomp and circumstance that you might get with a ceremony, a wedding as we would define it. A micro wedding is exactly what it sounds like. It's a small version of a wedding and a wedding reception that we all know and love. Typically defined through all of my reading, a micro wedding is defined as less than 50 guests, but it does include the reception, which would highlight and include catering and maybe alcohol consumption as well. So that generally will, as it proves, be a little bit more of a profitable venture for venues and planners, which I'll talk about later on today. The NPR article is, I'm not putting this in here to scare anyone, but the NPR article was included in something that I wanted to read about because it's a reality check and mainly something that we all need to be reminded of, given that privilege, as the gravity of the situation that we're in. The brides.com blog post is a great source of inspiration for couples, planners, and venues alike. Sometimes there's no better way to seeing what a successful event is by seeing what other people have done. And social media is a great resource for that. I can't recommend enough going to that blog post, looking for the trends and the mini-monies and micro weddings and seeing what was successful, pairing that with what you can do, and follow those hashtags on social media to find inspiration for your own venue, planning company, or vendor service. And then finally, the Wedding Pro article is something I will address later in the presentation. It serves as a benchmark in some ways to managing financial decisions, which I know is a super big aspect of all of this too. So, Joel, before I go into a lot of the presentation, is there anything that has popped up?
There's nothing that's popped up. So just a reminder, everyone, if you do have a question for Corey, you can type that in the Q&A, and Corey, you can keep on rolling.
Wonderful. Thanks a ton, Joel. So let's say I do to hosting weddings, and here's some compelling data as to why. And like I said, I don't think it's just mutually exclusive to 2019 and before. I think that we can really extrapolate this through 2021, 2022, as people are becoming more comfortable going back in person for events. The one thing that's completely different about the special event and wedding industry that you don't get on the professional side is this is something that is going to last with an individual or individuals for a very long time. So when it comes to managing their budget and sticking with a plan, they are much more likely to do so and stick with the budget that they had established than having to pare back or completely cancel. So when are the most popular times to get married? According to the data, the most popular wedding months are June, September, and October, which was a little bit surprising to me because I always tend to associate weddings with the summertime. But September and October can't be overlooked because most importantly, on average, the middle weekends of October and September are the most consistently busy wedding weekends annually. So as you're planning out your year, I really recommend looking at those dates on your calendar and seeing if there are ways that you can maybe, provide premium pricing for those dates, or maybe at least keep those open for the couples that are either trying to look or the ones who have already committed to a date and have paid in full. And if they're flexible to go to those dates, I recommend that as well. It seems to be a universally requested and enjoyable date for weddings. Outside of that, it says aside from 2020, in 2020, one of the most popular wedding months was not September, but it was May. So I think that was kind of more reflective of what was happening at the times as well. So another stat to give you some hope, even though engagements last on average 15 months, 57% of the couples discuss their venue before their engagement. So that's something that people, and you'll see as I continue to go through these stats, that these wedding couples, the couples who are getting married and engaged, are very active leading up to well in advance of when that engagement happens, and especially after that engagement. A lot of the planning and decision making, or at least gaining information about their decision making process, seems to happen within that short window right before and right after that they get engaged. Other pre-engagement activities include creating an inspiration or Pinterest board, researching vendor costs and availability, including the venues, and reading reviews and asking around to learn about other couples' experiences. That is another thing that's really, really big in the world of weddings that might be a little bit different than other venue or event types, is that people seem to really be interested in someone else's experience when they are going through this process. So one thing that I would recommend to you all as well, sitting in on the call today, is to really tap into those great experiences that you've hosted over the past year. And why I say this past year is because people are going to remember this experience. For the time being, people are expecting 2021 to be similar. And that's kind of how we're helping plan things. So leverage the excitement and the positive reviews that you might have at your disposal from a micro wedding or a mini moni or an adapted wedding to be able to showcase to folks who are interested in your venue, planning service, or you as a vendor can have an idea and kind of take that in, because I don't think a lot of people are actually doing that. I think a lot of folks are keeping with their standard testimonials. But as we all know, right now it's really hard to remain relevant. So you have to put in that extra work today to showcase who you are, what you can do for folks, and be a cut above the rest. So another stat to give you some hope. So engagement season is right around the corner. And I love this graph in particular because it is a great visualization of actually the dates and the times of the year when those engagements are most likely to take place. We at Unique Venues have a lead manager. Her name is Stephanie Watson. And every single lead that comes through, she qualifies and she sends out to the venues that are qualified to host that event. Typically, a lot of companies, campuses, they like to take off during the winter holiday season into the new year. We cannot afford that at Unique Venues because we have such a high demand for engagements and people looking for wedding venues around the Christmas into New Year season. For us, I would actually say that even though New Year's Day or Eve is by date the third most popular date, I think for us, that's actually when we see the most leads come through. And that could either be one of two things. One is people want to enjoy the festive season and get to something and tackle that project and finding a venue in the new year, or they're just so excited after that engagement that they want to start looking for things. But you'll see we're in October. November, December, January, and February is a peak season for engagements. So that should give you an idea and let you know that now is the time to start your marketing efforts to be able to attract the folks who are looking for the right service for them in 2021. Excuse me. Unsurprisingly, 88% of the planning process takes place online, and 75% of the couples refer to social media for inspiration and investigation into trends and venues. One thing that I didn't note in this stat that is going to be important to you is a lot of people are doing this kind of search process on mobile devices as well. So just make sure that your images, your website is mobile friendly and can appear really well in that space. So just be aware of that. And obviously your reputation precedes you. 65% of couples are seriously interested in the vendor reviews when planning who they engage for their booking and pulling off their event. So kind of going in again to that statistics that I keep talking about, people love hearing the voice of someone and the experience of someone that participated at your venue or with your service before. It can't be said enough. I know I'm guilty of it too. If I need to make a big decision, I'll ask a lot of other people what their experience was. So just put yourself in their shoes and be able to, and be prepared to give the folks what they're looking for. 30% of couples hire a wedding planner to help manage their special day. I'm surprised that it's not more. just because I know that I was needing one when I was planning my wedding a couple of years ago. But one thing that's really important is that 81% of the planning process is done and decided by the couple, and 19% is handled by other stakeholders like siblings of the couples, wedding party, parents, and the officiant in some cases. So it's hard enough to maybe manage the couple who you're helping to plan and execute their special day. And sometimes it's even more difficult to manage the relationships outside of that. One of my friends in particular who was able to talk to me about his own wedding process was that he was frustrated that the folks that he was engaging with in their planning, they just got engaged, weren't taking into account the stress that other family members might be putting on them. So finding a way to clearly communicate to all groups. So maybe that means setting time separately with the couple and all of the stakeholders in that conversation to help make decisions and plan that special day. Another thing that was pretty important to realize is that the generations, the younger generations, so millennials and Gen Z, you're increasingly seeing more parents involved in the payment and sharing budgetary responsibility for the wedding day. And some of the older generations, folks who are remarrying, for instance, that seems to be less of an issue. So it seems to be the younger couples that you might be meeting with who you have to kind of walk that line between talking with them and talking with their family too within this decision-making process, and realizing that sometimes the couple just doesn't have as much control over the situation as you might hope as a vendor or a venue supporting their day. Okay, let's talk about money. The average cost of a wedding in 2019 was almost $38,000. And within that, 10,500 of that budget and that spend was dedicated to the venue selection. Now, there's one key important word in this slide, and that's average. Obviously, you're going to have the couples who have a much tighter budget or different expectations as to what the venue of their dreams might realistically cost. And you might have folks with bigger budgets and going into that same conversation from the different angle where they're willing to spend more money for the venue of their dreams. So that again is a tight rope to walk. And I don't envy having to maybe be in those situations, especially now where people seem to be a little bit more eager and keeping a closer eye on their budget than ever before. Though all couples go into their planning period with a budget in mind, and this is important, 54% of couples ultimately increase their budget, and 45% of couples reallocate their funds. And in those cases, 26% of the increases or the reallocation goes to increasing their spend for the venue as well. The venue plays such a key and important part in someone's special day. And I think that this statistic in particular recognizes that fact. So how do these couples budget? And that budget's done online, which again, isn't a major surprise. Everything's done online. But what I think is something to be aware of is that couples are price shopping for their options through online searches, through advice from family and friends, pricing on wedding websites, and social media as well. And I know that this isn't something maybe I have an answer for today, but just maybe something to think about with your own website, your own social media marketing, how you want to be able to provide that information for people just searching and just kind of collecting information within this process. I know that it's a really hard thing to do, showcasing your pricing, because obviously your competitors can come to your site, see what your pricing is, price themselves accordingly if they're really wanting to create that competition rather than pricing effectively to the service, the location, and the venue that they can provide. But I think it's really important that there's some way that you're giving some folks an indication on what that pricing does look like. Because as all of the statistics have shown so far, and these aren't handpicked statistics, the statistics that I'm showing you today mattered most to this presentation in terms of the business model of weddings. This wasn't just picking the statistics that make wedding business look a lot better than it might be. But I can't say enough that it's really important to give people an idea of, your prices, what people can expect in that budgeting process, so that people aren't shocked later on and have to reestablish or maybe rethink their choices, or they can go into you with more meaningful conversations and relationship building conversations than more transactional conversations, because that creates less trust and loyalty to the venue and kind of gives you and puts you in a position to have to talk more as a value add than kind of lifting up the key areas of your venue. So where does this fit in for you all? I hope that it all has kind of fit into maybe what your model is so far, but talking a little bit about unique venues and our advice. If weddings aren't normally something that you host, or it's not a big percentage of your event business on an annual basis, for the next year, in the very least, our recommendation would be that you really do focus on social and special events for your venues. And we do have data to back that up. So in 2019, and this is pretty standard again, not just mutually exclusive to that year, unique venues processed, of all the leads that we processed, 58% of those leads for corporate professional events. That also includes corporate social, and about 28% of the leads that we processed that year were plainly social events. And then weddings and special events made up about another 22% or so of event types that we processed. Just looking at August and September data in the very least, which was our biggest 2-month period this year for leads processed on our site, 40% of the leads that we processed were for social events. 28% of leads that we processed were for special events. 15% of that was from weddings. And then 21% of the leads that we processed were for professional events, the corporate events. That was the biggest slice of the pie in 2019. And I think that that's a trend that's going to continue at least until the middle of next year, maybe even Q3 next year. You will still see professional business come through, meetings and leads. And that's not something that's just completely gone away and the rug is pulled out from underneath us, but it's just not going to be the highest demand event type moving forward. So if you don't specialize or don't like to host social and special events, I would recommend that you welcome those events. You use those to help you stay competitive and profitable over the next couple of months, because you're going to see a lot more of those coming through. So that's kind of the first half of the presentation. I also now want to get into some tips for you that you can walk away with and maybe bring to your venue or your company. Joel, is there any questions, notes that I should be aware of?
Nope. I think so far everybody's following along really well with the presentation. So just keep on going. And again, if anyone has a question for Corey, go ahead and submit it in the Q&A box. Thanks,
Joel. All right. So here we go. Tip number 1, and it doesn't need to really be said because I know that we're all empathetic individuals. We have to be in this industry, but it can't be overstated. There are some things that we hear during the pandemic that might be overstated. Unprecedented times. We're in this together. We'll make it through this. I almost want to mute those commercials anymore whenever I hear them, because that's not, it's obvious to me that we're in those times. One thing that I don't think can be said enough is to just be empathetic. So in talking with someone who is a professional in this field, she had mentioned that one of the hardest things for her and one of the biggest challenges during this time is the customer service aspect of working with couples. And we've all, I think, been taught in this hospitality field to work with folks and say yes and build on ideas and implement those ideas and help make someone's dream and vision come true. But right now, unfortunately, a lot of the yes ands has maybe turned into sorry or sorry, but, or well, I'm not sure. And the hardest one, no, we can't. And it's not my rule. It's just something that I need to do to stay open, my venue and vendor, my company open during these times. There are rules that we have to play within that we never had to play within before. So my advice to you is plan for what you can and keep an open line of communication. The challenge of being the target of your guests' frustration and anger, try not to take that personally. I maybe need to say that message to myself the most, but it's not a frustration directly at you, even though sometimes it can feel that way. Remember that the couples that you're working with are going through something brand new, that same experience that you're going and experiencing yourself. And not to mention, it's their special day. So have that grace for them. In some cases, being knowledgeable within this tip will require you to actively know and understand the vision and planning of the vendors that you might be working with as well. So those preferred vendors. So if you're a venue that does work with preferred vendors, or if you're a vendor that is a preferred vendor, it's important to have those conversations with your group and how to help safely execute this special day. And in kind of drawing on an example that the individual that I spoke with told me that in some cases, if you're not responsive enough to a question, maybe that couple is going to get itchy fingers and send that question to a colleague of yours, or maybe copy a vendor that you're working with that you're all kind of tied into. So it's really important, especially in those cases, that you all are delegating and understanding who the point person for communication is. Maybe it's also important to know how you all need to respond to the same questions moving forward, so that one person's not promising something that's not true, or maybe they're saying no to something that can be done. So it's really important, and it requires much more now than ever, clear communication and consistency, and your group working really as a team. Another thing too that I think we're all taught within this industry is to talk less and listen more, which is totally true. I would argue though that right now, these times require us to talk more and listen more. I don't think that it really hurts to over communicate any position that you might need to have or need to take, or just be more engaged in the conversations and reaching out with your couples than you might be before. And then it's really important too to have to manage the needs, the wants, and the concerns of your customers and potential customers with realities, roles, and safety. As you'll see, especially in that AP News article and the NPR article, is that it's really first of all, your reputation as a venue, your service, your planning is under a magnifying glass right now. And news outlets, especially locally, are going to jump on situations where an outbreak can be traced to an event that wasn't held safely or within the rules of what and how we need to be kind of managing life right now. So you really also need to put yourself in that position to be successful and to be a source of responsibility right now more than ever. So another tip that I wanted to share, which I found was really a good question that you can be asking folks. So you want to be asking guiding questions to truly understand the core motivations of your clients. And let's say that this is specifically unique to a customer, a couple that is hitting roadblocks, they're getting frustrated, they're having a hard time making decisions, especially if you're telling them you have this small window to make a decision and they're not moving. Some questions that I think might be helpful for you to ask. One, what is the focus really? What is the focus really for your wedding day? And another way that you can ask that and kind of question too is, why are you really having a wedding? And I think just by asking those questions and really letting them ruminate on that, if they can't answer that right away, first of all, that should give you an insight into where they're at. But secondly, depending on that answer, you can help work proactively and build trust in that conversation to be a trusted advisor and help them make that decision if they don't know, if they're in kind of this analysis paralysis or indecisive state, that you can give them those questions to think about, talk through the answers, and help your venue, vendor, planning service get the answer you need, but also give that couple some peace of mind in a position where they might be overly frustrated and having a hard time. When and where you can, another thing that you can do is over deliver. Take notes of all of the conversations. Find ways to sneak in surprise and delight moments. One thing that might be asked that you have to say no to early on, there might be a rule or regulation that's changed that allows that to happen later on. So go back to them and say, hey, I've got great news. We can do this now. This was something you really wanted to do, and be prepared to go to them with those options than waiting for them to say, hey, I think we can do this now. Is that right? That will build a ton of trust in this process. And most importantly, be available. People want one thing right now: predictability and control. That is so far gone for a lot of us at this time, that if you can give them that in the way that you communicate and work with them and show up to those meetings, they'll be overly gracious for the way that you can help them through their special day. And at the end of the day too, just know when to throw in the towel. I know that that's hard for, or maybe easy for me to say, being in my position, talking to you in your position, but don't be afraid to say no, hold on to that, and cut a relationship off if it needs to happen. If people just are clear that they don't want to follow the rules, you need to let them know that you won't allow that. And again, take the weight and importance of your facility and your reputation first. An extra tip too, don't underestimate the value of communicating face-to-face virtually when and however possible. Another one of my friends who's in the planning process says, it would just be so helpful if they would call me on FaceTime or offer to Zoom in with me so I could see the space, so I could see them, so they could see me. One of the most important things about communication is body language, and we miss so much of that over email and phone call conversations. If you can see someone on how they react or how they're asking or how they're saying something, it cuts out so many potential misinterpretations as to what might actually be happening in that relationship. So that's just tip number 1 of 5. So I'm going to go on to tip number 2. Be flexible with finances and booking. A challenge right now is many venues and vendors are running short on revenue as it is. So what happens when it comes to new business, rebookings, and cancellations? Outside of finances, this presents a sticky subject related to contractual obligations as well. And I think it's one thing that everyone might be feeling right now in particular. So aside from being empathetic, obviously, realize that the couples are dealing with the situation entirely out of their control. And this is a really hard topic, I think, for us to kind of address in this conversation too, because you ultimately know the financial strength and the flexibility that you have within your organization. There isn't a silver bullet that solves all of these problems for you. And you need to make those decisions for yourself in the best interest for your venue, your company, and your planning service, but also with consideration of where this couple might be coming from. Everything that you can do in this situation is in your control. So again, have those important conversations internally. If you're not privy to that information, and if you have to maybe go and get that kind of authority to slash prices, I recommend just really being on top of the ball, being proactive about this, running a ton of scenarios with your team to know that when the situation arises, you know how to respond. I want to address the Wedding Pro blog post that I kind of brought up in LinkedIn earlier. And Wedding Pros, they surveyed 8,000 wedding professionals. And the following trends were uncovered, at least related to finances. 68% of venues are holding deposits for rescheduled dates. So they're not refunding those deposits. Even if their original dates have come and gone, they're holding on to those because for a lot of people, that's their lifeline right now. That's the bridge that's going to keep everything working until that wedding can take place. And future payments and installments of those payments are taking place. 11% of venues are charging rebooking dates. If you can waive those if you need them. I don't think people would be object to that. So again, introduce those when and however you can. 21% of venues are waiving rescheduling fees. 15% of venues are offering discounts for future weddings. 9% of venues are increasing pricing for future weddings. And then 8% of venues are offering discounts to upfront payments. If people can pay for their deposit, their reservation in full in that moment, people are giving them the financial incentive to do so. Now, again, that does have downstream effects, so be aware of that, which I'm sure you are, but those are just some statistics for the industry. And again, I wish that I could really dive deeper into this, but you all have control of this. This is something that you need to make the decisions for with your team about. And don't forget to market, and make this information clear and accessible to people who are wanting to have this information at their disposal. Tip number 3, present new wedding packages. And this is kind of one of the more exciting tips for me, because I think this is where the creativity gets to come in. COVID-19 has pushed us all to adopt and learn new things quickly. I often tell people that it seems like COVID has pushed trends that were 10 years away, 10 years sooner. One example of that is ordering groceries over your phone and having someone deliver them or pick them up. Another example of that, especially in our world, is hybrid and virtual events. I think if you ask planners, which we have, most of those planners will say that hybrid events are here to stay. They were always going to be right around the corner, but COVID gave us the necessary time to really adopt them, get to learn them, and cement them into our annual business models. Whereas virtual might just be a good substitution for the in-person event right now. So for you all, and weddings especially, one of those major demands is going to be smaller weddings. So how do you meet those demands? My recommendation in this case is to create campaigns and proactively plan for couples who may want to hold small celebrations. That's not to say that you're working with couples who actually have to pare back their guest list, but we're imagining the brand new potential couples, the prospective couples, the ones getting engaged over the winter holiday season that might be going into the planning period knowing that their event's going to be smaller. So proactively plan for that. When planning packages, remember room sizes, prices, and bundle in the opportunity for an in-person celebration or large reception the following year. That seems to be a trend mainly with mini-monies, where those couples are wanting to share that small, intimate ceremony moment, but wanting to have a big party later on. So build that into the package, give them the option to book that and sign up for that in that time, or give them the opportunity to back away and say, you know what, maybe we don't want to do that right now, but present them that option. Don't require or make them ask that. Give that to them in advance. For mini monies, too, you can do some really fun things like offer maybe like a mini moni and picnic, or do some fun catering options where you're still making money in some of the more profitable areas for the events themselves, but giving them an experience that's unforgettable. You know, one thing that's really interesting about micro weddings, now shifting gears, micro weddings, even though they're going to have smaller guest lists, the price per guest is actually higher because in catering situations, we all know that the smaller the group that you need to plan for, likely the higher the cost is per person eating. So these people are really wanting to have food and wanting to have alcohol and wanting to have that celebration aspect of the wedding afterwards and after the ceremony. Now, as we get into the winter months and kind of later fall and winter months, we know that people are going to maybe still want to try their hardest to keep an event outdoors because the science, CDC, a lot of reputable sources are saying that the safest place to be without masks is outdoors. So some ideas for micro weddings could include a drive-in wedding event where you can host and stage the ceremony outside, let people sit and participate within their clusters in their cars, deliver food to them, and then kind of open up the outdoor space with a dance floor or with whatever else the couple wants to have that celebration there. One of the things that I learned about in talking with my friends as well, who were kind of in the wedding planning process, and I thought this was actually something I never would have imagined. He said that for our micro wedding, it would have been helpful to have day of coordination. We scaled it back a lot from our original plan, and we didn't think we would need someone helping us through the day with just 20 of us. However, having someone to orchestrate and make sure things run smoothly would have really helped the big day. So I think for some couples, they're creating this false narrative or correlation that the smaller the wedding, the less help I need. Just remind people that the last thing that they want to have to deal with on their wedding day is hurting their family from the ceremony to the reception hall, and keeping people on track during the fun parts of the reception, like maybe the first dance or toasts or cake cutting ceremonies, which are still really big right now. So make sure that you're maybe even proactively building those in to the micro weddings, and just reminding people that you're there to serve and help execute their special day, and that it shouldn't be their responsibility to coordinate and have everything go from A to B. And let's just see. Oh, this was a big part. This is another question I got leading up to this session, is an unintended consequence. So if you can't have those events outdoors, you're likely bringing small groups into really big spaces. So how do you make that big space feel small? That's a really great question. Those bigger spaces that you'll be using are designed the way that they are because they want to give you a higher ceiling. They want to give you colors to make you feel like you're not in a parking garage. If you're in a parking garage, it almost feels like there's no room to breathe. So when you're in these larger spaces, the way that those venue spaces and event halls are designed are to give you a sense that you can breathe, expand, fill into that space, and not feel crammed into that space. So in one hand, when it really helps you, on this hand, it really hurts you. So the challenge of bringing unintended consequences logistically, aesthetically, will almost feel like you're drawing your attention to the smaller size of the wedding when you put that group in the big space. So some ideas on how to deceive the eye, and that's really all that it is to pull off a space that feels as right as it looks. So some ideas that I came across in my research are use plants and greenery to almost create a barrier of the space that you're in. This will not only draw the attention to the event goers to a clearly defined space, yet provide kind of a soft perimeter, but the liveliness of the plants will make the room feel really warm and intimate as well. If the greenery and live plants are kind of out of your budget or the budget of your group that you're working with, don't discount pipe and drape. Use that creatively as well. One thing that's really important in making your big venue feel small and right sized for this event too is the ceiling. Often larger spaces, like I said, have that higher ceiling as a complement to make the room feel bigger when it's packed with guests. As a way to minimize this sensation, venues are encouraged to find ways to draw the attendees' eyes from the ceiling down to where the event is taking place. And it's going to create an illusion that the room and the space that you're in is tighter, more confined. So in this example, consider how those drapes that I just mentioned or floral arrangements can be used to lower the ceiling. You could either attach those to the ceiling and almost kind of create a curved line with the drapes that kind of feed down to the ground and just make that room feel almost like a tent, or just feel a little bit tighter and cozier. Go against the grain and use non-traditional selected tables and layouts to space things out. This is tricky because the COVID guidelines are obviously wanting to keep folks at a safe distance at those tables, but tables with those harder angles and edges can fill up a floor space that rounded tables generally help to minimize when used correctly and used in those bigger events when we always have to use them. So while you're at it, on those tables to recommend taller centerpieces that really kind of break up the space as you're looking across the room. And use lighting to your advantage. Lighting is so important. Help set the mood. It's going to draw the attention to where you want the guest to be focused. So a lot of the experts that I was reading were recommending to have spotlights over tables or the areas of the room that you wanted people to go to. If there's a lounge space, a photo booth, or a wall that's celebrating the couple that day, bring those lights to those spots, because where you like the room is where people are going to want to be, and just dim the lights around it in those dark areas to remind people that that's not a space that we need to be in or fill right now. And then when it comes to color as well, warm lights are going to make that space feel warmer as well. And they're going to make guests feel comfortable in that space versus maybe bright, energetic kind of color schemes. And then most importantly, with everything that I just recommended, If you can do those, that's only half of the battle. Make sure that you're actively promoting this to existing and potential customers and couples. I can't say that enough. This would give your venue a huge boost in trust, not only coming to them proactively and saying, we're going to help minimize all of these things that happen with small weddings in big spaces, for instance. So it's going to build trust, and it's going to show people that you mean business and you know what you're doing and you know how to handle these kinds of events in the COVID times. Don't let good intentions and proper planning go to waste is really what I'm trying to say. And if you're in the boat and looking for the right way to showcase your venue, but needing the support or guidance, you can reach out to us at Unique Venues and learn more about how other venues are doing it that we can connect you with. We also, if you don't have the team right now to build new marketing collateral, we offer those solutions for you too. And I know that we'd be happy to help you respond and proactively market that to the industry. Tip number 4, clear communication wins. Even though we have information to abide by and share right now, it can change at a moment's notice. Additionally, some of our clients and their entourage aren't gifted communicators themselves. So what can you do as a venue to help mitigate the confusion, the things that might be lost in translation? Traditionally, we were told that the 4 P's of marketing are product, price, place, and promotion. And the 4 C's of marketing are consumers' wants and needs, cost, convenience, and communication. And anytime when you're building a plan to reach out to folks in that manner, those are the 4 P's and the 4 C's to live by. Well, Unique Venues has partnered with the University of Boston School of Hospitality to provide the 4 C's of marketing that are important during COVID. And they're just some things that I want you to maybe jot down and remember as well. And I'll send a link with this, with the follow-up. Those 4 C's of marketing during COVID are compassion, comfort, clarity, and credibility. And compassion just means care for our associates, your colleagues, your guests, and the stakeholders. Let people know that you truly care about the situation that we're in. The comfort is referring to sharing information about safety, security, sanitation, the practices a guest would want to understand before attending their event and wanting to know that they need to abide by once they plan their event. Excuse me. Clarity means how important it is to be specific and transparent, avoiding ambiguity in the messaging and communication. If you know that there's hard news that you need to share it. People are going to want to get that up front than have to read a lengthy message about what that ultimately means for them. Again, people want control and predictability. So if you're giving them exactly what they're looking for, you're likely going to have less time maintaining that relationship and keeping people happy. And credibility means that the venue is actually delivering the marketing promise and executes the safety, security, sanitation, operational steps, and that the venue is communicating and not just selling or coming across as insensitive or inappropriate during a delicate and uncertain time. So make sure that those 4 C's are included in all of your future marketing plans. And I'm running short on time, so I'm going to just kind of breeze through this last one, which is just have fun with it for the couples and for your business. Because what is life without a little bit of enjoyment? I know that a lot of people are attracted to this industry because not every day feels the same. Not every event is the same. And there's so much fun and challenge associated with all of that. So I've got a couple of tips that can help make the process feel fun. One is because hybrid meetings are here to stay, and because hybrid weddings in particular are here to stay, I challenge you all to be adaptive in embracing this event style and be on the forefront of creating experiences conducive to this virtual event type. Live stream wedding services is really important. One of the weddings that I wasn't able to go to earlier this year had a guest in the corner of the venue filming the wedding on a smartphone for Facebook. And I think one thing that you all can do that people would totally appreciate is if you have a team member who is there at every event, regardless, to help out, and if they can take time during that wedding to stream for the guests and for the couple, that would make such a huge difference, especially as people are really trying to cut back on phone distraction during the ceremony. So proactively offer this. And to help boost your social media presence at the same time, offer to live stream this on your social media platform and your venue's pages. That will draw more traffic to that. That will give prospective clients an idea of the business and kind of the service that you can provide. And it would help cut back on people who are still in the decision-making process as to what their special day might look like at your venue. Use social media and past happily married couples to your advantage to gain interest and traffic. I touched on this very early on, but I was just thinking about what this might mean in execution. And last night, I thought it was a fun idea in the sense of host like a virtual newlywed game for the people that got married this year, and ask the questions about how people felt, how the couples felt individually about having to make decisions, about having to host a wedding during COVID, about what mattered most to them. And by being able to provide a fun environment like that and have people sit in and hear, especially prospective clients, it will give them answers to some of the questions that they might have going into that conversation. And what better way, again, to showcase positive testimonials to get people to be really interested in wanting to engage with your venue and have fun with you to plan their special day. And then finally, pair up with preferred vendors to create mutually beneficial marketing campaigns. They're needing the promotion as much as you are, and give people the solutions that they're looking for in one place. One-stop shop is a term that we all like to use. Give them that option in the planning process through promoting and working with your preferred vendors in promoting your space. Finally, Unique Venues is going to be doing more in the wedding space moving forward. This is a great quote from Allison, a team member here. I'm sure you've seen her if this isn't your first webinar. Every couple deserves a wedding venue as unique as their love story. And that's something that we really hope to tap into moving forward. I don't want to spill the beans today. I just want to give you that heads up and let you know that next week during UVAMC, you'll hear a little bit more about what Unique Venues is all about. So here's my picture from our wedding day as well, walking into the reception hall. I hope that you can all feel as energized and excited going into 2020, the end of this year, and early 2021. So thank you all for your attention today.
Great. Well, thank you, Corey. I really appreciate it. We're getting some shout outs as well in the chat box. The session evaluation is out there, so if you have to drop off, we understand, and thanks for attending today. We did have a couple questions I just wanted to run by you really quickly. One was from Matt. He wanted to know if you knew what the average guest count per wedding was in 2019. And if you don't know that off the top of your head, which article could he go to find that info?
The Wedding Wire Newlywed Report will tell you that. And I read it so many times, I can tell you that answer is 131 or 132, somewhere in that range.
That's excellent. Perfect. So there's the answer, Matt, and we got that one. The other one was from an anonymous attendee, but is really struggling with the ethics of holding certain events right now, especially those with alcohol. And as we know, weddings are definitely something that often have an alcohol component to it, not just the toast, but a lot of the pre-reception, during reception, post-reception activities. And we know that once alcohol is introduced into an environment, people tend to get a little lax with following rules and regulations and guidelines. So in your research, what did you find about this notion of dealing with the alcohol issues? Is it better to just tackle it head on and say, we're not going to do that? Or are there some tips that you can give people for if we're still going to try to do this, even in a mini moni or a micro wedding, what are some better practices or things we can do around alcohol management?
That's a good question. And I totally understand where you're coming from. I don't have the answer. Some of the things that I read in my research did touch on it. And here's just two things that I'll share. The first is, I don't think anyone can blame you for being in that position and making a decision either way. So I would just say that once you make that decision, be prepared to clearly communicate that, answer questions, and kind of address that up front. The second thing I will mention is that, I have three things. So 2 of 3 is that going back to millennial and Gen Z weddings, alcohol does seem to be an important aspect of the reception. So I think people, as much as they'll understand a position that you're in to say, we just can't do this, I think they aren't expecting that position. So that's just another thing to be aware of. And then thirdly, especially for the mini monies and the micro weddings, I think that you have much more control in these situations over alcohol consumption. And one thing that I was reading is that, especially for the mini monies, it'd just be a nice gesture to offer the 10 guests maybe 2 bottles of champagne or wine. At that point, you're giving them something, you're giving them an aspect of a wedding that people are used to and accustomed to. But in that same moment, you're limiting by giving them 1 or 2 bottles, how much that they can consume at that time and in that moment. And 2 bottles spread between 10 guests, I would think that maybe that won't take people to a point of being making poor decisions based on the amount of alcohol that they've consumed.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that insight and the rest of your insights today. I know we have some people that are going to be very excited to get the PDF of your slide deck that have all the links in it, because we've definitely gotten some questions and interest in that. So we'll be getting that to you within the next couple of days, probably by the end of the week. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen back here really quick and just wrap up with, there we go. A reminder that we have planner roundtable this Thursday. So if you are a planner and you would like to attend a roundtable with other planners and talk about the issues of the day, please join us this Thursday. And then next Thursday, October 29th, is our 2020 version of Spooky Spaces, which is going to be a fun glimpse into a few venues that have haunted tales of ghosts and specters roaming their property, to share with you as in a way of having some fun around the Halloween time period, as well as featuring their venues and what a spooky space can bring to your experience with a meeting and event. So if you want to register for those, head on over to our resources page. You'll be able to find the registration links. And with that, again, I just want to thank Corey for his time. Thank everyone for their attendance today. And we look forward to seeing you on a future Unique Venues webinar, or especially if you haven't yet, there's still time. Get yourself signed up for UVAMC next Monday and Tuesday, and we'll see you there. Thanks, everyone, and have a great rest of your afternoon.
Thanks, everyone, so much. This was great. I had a lot of fun.
Take care.